work on that as well. And of course, there's always questions, oh, what if you have SIBO and you can't take prebiotics? And what about paleo people who are eating, or the people that eat no grains? And, I would say that the priority for me in working with arthritis, and let's just focus on that, is to feed people prebiotic foods that will increase their fatty acids. And so that becomes a priority for me on the occasions when people have a little SIBO, or they have SIBO, and most of them, I would say it's not a majority at all. It's a minority of my RA people have showed up also with SIBO. And I just use the FODMAP diet to restrict the prebiotic stuff at the beginning to help them control their symptoms if they're very symptomatic. Otherwise, I allow, prebiotic food in their diet. Beta-glucuronidase is a really interesting metabolic marker, and I think for me, I actually really pay attention to this. I think it's an enzyme that's produced by anaerobes that can be really harmful, and of course, it's bad. Beta-glucuronidase will tell you to recycle your estrogen to reabsorb it, and so it's not good, especially for breast cancer prevention, and so you want to get it down, not only because it's good for your hormones and for preventing too much estrogen activity in the body, but you want to get it down because it's a sign that you have this anaerobic overgrowth that you don't want. And so when there's a high beta-glucuronidase, I actually continue treatment until it's down. And so that is one other thing I'm following as just an indication that the microbiome is not in good shape or that there's something that needs treatment. So calprotectin is sort of a derivative of the white blood cells, and so as such, it's really just a marker for immune system activity. It's if you're having some immune reaction in the gut, and so certainly this will help you screen for ulcerative colitis, inflammatory bowel disease, whether or not somebody has active proctitis or diverticulitis, all the itises you will pick up. The other thing that you can pick up is subclinical. If it's a little high, you can say, there's some inflammation in there. And sometimes you'll see it high if there's a parasite. But it is something you want to follow. And if somebody has calprotectin over 50 or it's really high, then you really have to be concerned about inflammatory bowel disease, and if it stays high, and or colon cancer. And so it's actually a really good marker to follow that and to make sure it goes down. And sometimes I refer somebody and I tell them you need to go get a colonoscopy because the calprotectin is high. And so that's really important. And I actually do a stool, so I didn't put that on here. But a stool test picks up blood in the stool as well. And I do want to give you an anecdotal case that we had here. And it was somebody that came in for not an RA, but one of my other clinicians here did a stool test, and she had some blood in her stool, and so the doc sent her for colonoscopy, and they actually found a pre-malignant polyp in her stool, in her gut. And the gastroenterologist called here and said, what did you do? How did you know to send her? This had been less in another year even, and she was in her 30s. She was young, or it was maybe 40, so it was before. If she had waited for her colonoscopy at 50, was what the doc said to her, this would have been a stage 3 colon cancer. And as such, she caught it, and the whole thing was taken out. She didn't need anything else other than, excision and biopsy. And so calprotectin is a really great thing as a screening tool, for the patients. It's sort of a great thing to have, to know from a prevention standpoint. And also with the pie, though, you want to follow it, and you want to follow up on it. And so EPS, for me, when I see a high EPS, I start looking for parasites even harder, and I do have a local guy in New York City. But sometimes stool tests aren't really the best at finding a parasite because, the parasites often have to be excreted in the stool to pick it up, and it's not a fault of the stool test per se. It's really just the way it is with parasites. So if the EPS is high, I continue to look harder, for a parasite. I send them to the parasite guy in the city who does a scraping of the distal sort of proctitis, the area. So there's some of the distal colon, and he can get in. He does an anus scope, and he scrapes, and he can look. And eosinophils is what the EPS is really showing you is an allergy marker, and that's the bottom line. And I'll send people to the allergist to look at actual true food allergy testing. to see whether or not if the EPS doesn't go down. But I find that the eosinophils are really reacting to not just run-of-the-mill dysbiosis. Sometimes I see it can be up if you have candida. And I didn't put that here, but parasites, candida, food allergies. So you have to sort of know to look for other things with that. So all those things are really important, and we want to know about them. And what can you do if you don't want to? What does conventional medicine offer us? For that, the first thing is about the calprotectin. And the calprotectin, because it's become a mainstream test, and the studies show that it's such a good screening test, you can actually get stool for calprotectin through a conventional lab. And you can actually get fecal fat also through a conventional lab. The problem is they're not as sensitive. The ranges are not necessarily that helpful. They're not as standardized for what we're looking for. But it is possible to get it. So, but you can conventionally get it covered by insurance and have the breast testing done by your gastroenterologist. You can send out stool for ovarian parasites. I've never found anybody come back with anything positive from that. Now, at the end of the day, your patients might end up going and getting a endoscopy or colonoscopy. That's really the tools that the gastroenterologist, what could the gastroenterologist really do for your patient? They can do an endoscopy and look at and see if it looks like they're having reflux or if they're having gastritis, but all that tells you, if they have reflux or any of those things, it tells you they probably have dysbiosis that you need to treat. Or they have this food sensitivity that needs to be treated, and so in terms of reflux. But it means they need some sort of treatment. And I also didn't mention then about the digestion markers and whether or not they're digesting their food, which could be a problem in reflux. So endoscopy will help with that. And I have to say that I find endoscopy and colonoscopy, like I said, there's a reason for using those things in addition. Those are not separate. They're not going to replace using a stool test to follow dysbiosis. None of these things are really going to help you identify, treat, and follow bacterial or yeast dysbiosis in the gut. And so what kind of stool tests should we use? Now, the two tests that I use commonly here, and sometimes I'll just use a basic CDSA if I'm just doing a quick follow-up for the culture. That's one piece that can be this one. I'll just use the CDSA. But the GIFX or the CDSA, now, until recently, we really couldn't do a GIFX with our Medicare patients, and so you're going to see the case study that I'm using today. The main one is going to have used the CDSA, and then the second one I set up with GIFX, and so that we can at least talk that through. I always use it for my initial assessment, and then I follow it. And because here's the thing, and this is something that I have come to learn, and this is my sort of 15 years of functional medicine experience, is that one of the things that I think we fail to do in the whole integrative medicine sphere is that we don't finish what we start. We don't, we all know the 5R Guts program from functional medicine, and we know how to sort of do this program, and we can get people started. Here's the 30-day gut program. Here's how to reboot the gut. That's not enough. And actually, somebody with RA or somebody with inflammatory arthritis, we're going to be working with them for a couple of years. Although I have to tell you, I had the second case today is somebody who had early inflammatory arthritis, and it just happened, and we were able to treat him quickly. But somebody showing up, or somebody that has a diagnosis, is on multiple medications, that's going to take you a while to get ahead of that. And you have to finish what you start, and which means multiple courses of gut treatment. How do you know what to change to? How do you know if you need to keep going? And that, finishing what you start, is really what I'm all about these days, because I have so many people in my practice that I've been following for a lot of years, and this is sort of my take-home and my sort of clinical call I want to share with you is that, it's not enough to just keep it at once. I mean, it's sort of like detox. Somebody who's a big toxin load, you can't just do 21-day detox and think you're done. That's not going to really unload their toxic burden. You have to look at how are we going to finish this? How are we going to continue it? And how are we going to finish what we start? So let me tell you about my coaching team. Now, she's the most wonderful woman, and she, well, of course, most motivations are, I like to think, but the nice thing about Jen is she came religiously, like every 4 to 6 months she came back. We worked together for, 2 years. She came in, she had already for 2 years at the point that I first saw her, and she said, "Oh, darling, really quickly." I mean, within 2 years, so she came to see me, she was 2 years in. Within 2 years, her hands were deformed, she had terrible pain, and she really was anxious. She tried everything else. Right? She was on Plaquenil, methotrexate, prednisone. She tried other things. The prednisone, none of those things worked. So they finally added prednisone, and she was on 5 milligrams of prednisone that she couldn't get lower when she came to see me. Even with all that on board, she could not open water bottles. Her husband was passing her bra and getting her dressed in the morning. She was really, really disabled. And she had a very interesting history, and the history, right, timeline. It's so important that we all get the history of our people, and it was so clear to me. Sometimes it's very obvious that there are blood issues, and sometimes it's not, but with her, it was really obvious. Her husband worked for the government in the Foreign Service, and so she lived abroad most of her life, and then only moved back to Connecticut like 5 years prior. Actually, she already developed after she moved back to the States, but she had a history of parasites, giardia, worms, dysentery, colitis. She had so many gut issues. When she came to see me, she actually had like no gut symptoms, very much. I mean, mild, if anything. She had none of these things, and they were treated multiple times in the past. When I did her initial testing, she had positive CCP antibodies. Now, for those of you not familiar with RA, there are 2 antibodies that we test for. One is rheumatoid factor and one is CCP. CCP antibodies, when they're positive, are the most conclusively associated with RA. They are, whereas the rheumatoid factor can be false positive from infections, mostly, and other autoimmune conditions. You can actually get a positive rheumatoid factor after a viral illness. There are certain things that consider RS. But CCP, if it's positive, they have RA. And it's called citric, it's a citrullimated peptide antibody. And this whole thing about citrullination of peptides we won't talk about today, but that's what I was following, is what I want you to know. I was following her CCP then to see how she was doing with the treatment. Her CRP and the ESR, those are inflammatory markers. With the treatment that she was having with the Plaquenil, methotrexate, and prednisone, her CRP and her testing were fine. Okay, they were really not bad at all. But she was still very symptomatic. Her ANA was negative, her vitamin D seemed okay, and the chronic pain had just depleted her adrenal hormone, the DHEA.
trials, registries, and basic research. In 2005, Dr. Olmsted joined ProThera as its Chief Science Officer, and Dr. Olmsted provides scientific support to both technical services and marketing at ProThera. He designs and directs clinical trials of ProThera products, including probiotics. Dr. Olmsted's current interests are in the development of innovative probiotic and prebiotic formulations and the use of nutraceuticals to disrupt dysbiotic biofilms. And one of the most common questions we get asked during the webinars is about availability of this presentation and the slide deck. These materials will be available on our website within a week of the webinar. If you're interested in having these resources, please click the Clinicians tab on the home page where you will find access to our webinars. Or you can also log in to find the webinars in your MyGDX account. If you do not have a MyGDX account, please click on the Getting Started link on our home page. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the controls over to Dr. Olmsted.
Great. Thank you very much. As mentioned, my name is Stephen Olmsted, and I'm happy for this invitation to speak about one of my favorite topics, which is probiotics. I do work for ProThera. I'm their Chief Science Officer, and in the interest of full disclosure, we do market the Claire Laboratories hypoallergenic, high-potency brand of probiotics, so keep that in mind when you evaluate what I'm saying. So let's talk about the intestinal microbiota. So this is essentially an organ within us, and we'll get into this more. It's composed of over 100 trillion microorganisms. To put this in perspective, the microbiota, the gastrointestinal microbiota, contains 10 times the number of human cells. So although in terms of absolute mass, it's quite small, in terms of numbers, it's quite large relative to us. So we are definitely composite organisms, meta-organisms, if you will. When you look at the amount of genetic information, the microbial genetic information just dwarfs the human genome. Most of what's going on genetically in our body is in fact microbial, and there's quite a bit of crosstalk that takes place. And we focused on the bacterial microbiota, but it's now being appreciated that there are other contributing organisms such as the archaea, certainly fungi, and to an extent that which we really have no idea the millions of viruses, trillions of viruses that are within us. So all of this is taking part in forming the microbiota. We used to say that there was, you look in the literature, you'll see 400 species, 500 species, 600 species, but well, we now know there are thousands of species, potentially, and we know this by sequencing sequencing the DNA of ribosomal RNA. And so we currently, and this was information that was published in Nature, we currently know that there are over 1,800 genera represented in the intestinal microbiota, and somewhere between 15,000 and 36,000 species can be detected. Nobody harbors all of these. And so the average person is going to harbor somewhere around 150 species. These are dominated by two divisions. Two phyla are very large organizational categories of organisms. So, for example, a phylum would be the Chordata. So we're a member of the phylum Chordata, but obviously there's lots of diversity among members of the phylum Chordata, including the various different vertebrates, which is just one family in that. The microbiota is dominated by two divisions. The Firmicutes, these are gram-positive organisms. It's usually about 64% of the population, and the Bacteroidetes, these are gram-negative organisms, and that's usually about 23%, at least in Western populations. There's some variability in this, and we'll talk about that later. The vast majority of organisms in the intestinal microbiota are anaerobic, strictly anaerobic, fastidious. We can't culture most of them. That number ranges, I've seen in the literature, anywhere from 70% to 90%. A lot of these organisms, we just can't reproduce the conditions that they need for optimal growth, and it may well be that they can't be grown in isolation, that they need to be grown along with other organisms that perhaps